Now we will have the opportunity to listen to the presentation by David Finkelhor, Professor David Finkelhor, from the Center of Research on Crime Against Children from the New Hampshire University.
Because we now are after lunchtime, and what time do you have at office?
It is 9 a.m. in the morning here.
Great. So it is a very good opportunity to connect with all the world. So David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm returning a bit to my roots. About 3/4 of my family came to the United States from the area around Suwałki in the 1880s. And I've been back. It's a very lovely place. I wish I could be with you again to visit. I'm going to be talking about internet or digital safety education and the results of some research and a project that I did, which has come to a fairly radical conclusion that much of what we are doing in the area of internet safety education is misguided. So we're all aware of the fact that there's a lot of anxiety about children and the internet. These are some images from the concerns in the United States. I don't know whether the term boogeyman translates into Polish, but it is a word meaning a very scary individual. As a result, we have seen the development of many internet safety education programs in the United States. These are a few of them, very colorfully presented. Here are some of their names. And I know that there are similar kinds of programs with similar kinds of messages that have been developed in Europe, in Poland specifically, and throughout the world as well. But unfortunately, a lot of these programs have some problems. They're based on fuzzy or incomplete logic models. Their idea about how the problem occurs and what needs to be done is mistaken. They haven't been evaluated to see if, in fact, they are effective. They utilize less effective modalities. That means they don't use teaching techniques that have been shown to be most effective. And they've grown in their scale and size without really being able to be sure that they're having the impact or success that we would want them to have. So I consider these to be under development. My alternative suggestion, based on the evaluation I've done of the prevention education field, is that we should be taking online safety messages and elements and integrating them into already existing offline programs for prevention and youth safety. These programs already exist and cover topics like sex education, bullying, child sexual abuse, dating, violence and abuse, mental health and suicide prevention, and that using these already existing programs will help the internet safety messages to be much more successful. The argument for this kind of integration is based on 5 important elements. First of all, it turns out that most of the online harms and problems occur connected to offline problems as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but bullying and online grooming are really connected to there are offline similar problems as well. Secondly, the offline forms of these problems are more common, more pervasive than the online forms. Thirdly, the risk factors, the things that put young people at risk for victimization and harm online are the same as those that put youth at risk for harm in offline or face-to-face contexts. Fourth, the evidence basis for prevention in the offline domain is much better developed. And finally, the offline programs are already well disseminated, at least in the United States and some other places in the world. And so adding on to them will speed the dissemination of safety messages about online as well. So I've made an assertion that there's a strong co-occurrence of online and offline harms. I just want you to be familiar with some of the research on this. So studies we have done on online bullying, on cyberbullying, show that 2/3 of the online cyberbullying episodes are actually linked to offline bullying. They occur at the hands of children and youth who the victims know in their school or in their neighborhood or in their community. And the same is true for online grooming. Studies of representative samples of cases coming to the attention of police show that 2/3 of the offenders arrested for online grooming were actually people that the youth knew from offline contexts, like their school or their church or some youth serving organization. It's also the case that when young people are victimized by sextortion or images that someone has got hold of and is using them to harass that youth, 60% of those victims said the perpetrator was somebody that they knew offline. So typically a romantic partner or somebody, some friend from school or from the neighborhood. So you can see how connected the offline and the online episodes are. The second point elaborating here is just the strong evidence base that exists for offline prevention. So there are over 100 of offline bullying prevention programs that have been evaluated. There are more than 24 sexual abuse prevention programs that have been evaluated. There are 24 teen dating abuse prevention programs that have been evaluated. There are nearly 83 sexual risk-taking prevention programs. And there are a number of self-harm and suicide prevention programs that have been positively evaluated. This is a very deep and rich knowledge base, which we should be building on rather than trying to invent something new that hasn't been adequately tested. If we build on these existing programs, we're more likely to be effective. We're going to achieve effectiveness more quickly. We're going to have a more pervasive safety effect because we'll be reaching more children. And we will avoid unnecessary competition. This is a very important point. I don't know exactly how this may work in Poland, but typically school-based or other kinds of prevention programs have to be chosen by decision makers, principals of schools, other educational authorities, and they have to compare doing one topic or another topic. If you present them with an internet safety education program, they may have to move something else out of the curriculum to make it available. And this is an unnecessary kind of competition. We should be trying to provide integrated programs to make sure that all the topics are covered. I mentioned that there are problems with the logic model of a lot of these programs. So here are some examples. A lot of the online grooming prevention programs have messages like the following. Don't go to meet strangers. Don't communicate online with people you don't know. People aren't always who they appear to be. The assumptions behind these messages are that youth are being fooled by someone who is acting like a friend of the same age, but who is really interested in sex or sexual exploitation. But our studies about how children become engaged by online groomers is that most of them get victimized because they are actually online and interested in sex and romance, and that they know much about the abuser when they start to engage with them. The majority of the online grooming, as I suggested, occurs at the hands of people that they already know. When youth go to meet these people who they're having online correspondence with, they tend to know that these are adults and that sex and romance are part of what is going to be happening. 75% of victims had sex on multiple occasions with the people that they met. And then about 20% of them were boys looking for guidance around sexual orientation. So these weren't youth who were being fooled by the age or the interests of the people that they were communicating with. What they were being fooled about more was that these would be appropriate relationships, or that these relationships had some potential or future to them, or that these people were really interested in them as a young person rather than just for their sexual access. There may be better messages that we could give these young people to protect them, but unfortunately, we haven't really tested out a lot of these messages, and they are more complicated messages than just telling them not to communicate with strangers or not to give out personal information. For example, we might want to help them think through why a relationship with an older partner would be a mistake. We may want to help them think through how to decide on who would be an appropriate romantic partner and why this person that they're communicating with is not a good one. We may want to give them skills about how to get out of or extricate themselves from inappropriate relationships, so that if they find themselves going further than they wanted to, they know how to say no and break it off. They may need to know that their communications with this person might create the possibility of this friend, so-called friend, going to jail. And in fact, instead of making them feel like they're unable or too young to have a relationship, they might give them a sense of power that they could cause harm to this person, and would they want that to happen? We also might want to give messages to young people about how to help their friends when they notice that these friends are engaging in these kinds of conversations, and how to help friends feel empowered to discourage their friends from continuing with them. Those are things that I think would be better messages than what we're currently using. Here's similar kinds of problems that I see with the whole issue of sexual images and how we're talking about sexual images. In the United States, at least, a lot of the warnings about sexting are kind of categorical. They tell young people not to share sexual images. They warn them that they can't control who they will see them. And they even warn that they could be prosecuted for making these images. For the most part, these are what I call prohibitionist and scare or fear-based messages. We have not found those kind of messages to be successful in the past in controlling young people's sexual behavior. And they can even backfire, because if the young person finds themselves in difficulty, they are not going to ask for help, because they could imagine that they themselves would be prosecuted for making these images. Are there better messages? There may be, but sexting is complicated, and I don't think that we have really done the background research to find out what are the most persuasive messages in this area. Some forms of image sharing of a romantic and sexual nature may be developmentally normative. The problems that develop in this area aren't just about making and sending the images. They are about dealing with bullying, harassment, dating abuse, and online grooming. And most of the sexting is with acquaintances. So talking about what are ways in which they can decide whom to trust and who to trust with what in relationships is probably a key skill in this area. So the sexting prevention messages or discussions need to be integrated into education about bullying, sexual abuse, relationship abuse, be part of sex and dating education. We really need to focus on decision-making and refusal skills so that young people can decide when they're being requested to send images, how to deflect that, or how to comply in ways that don't make them vulnerable. And we have to give them information about how to get images removed or retrieved if they do run into trouble with images that they've shared. This is a very complicated topic area that I don't think is going to respond to just simple prohibitionist type messages. There is a big dilemma, and I'm sure you experience this in Poland as much as we do in the United States. Educators are nervous about comprehensive sex education, and it's much easier for parents and program developers to talk about stranger danger messages, but those aren't likely to be the most effective messages and respond to the reality of the dynamics. And we shouldn't be complicit in the idea that sexual risk-taking and harms can be prevented without comprehensive sex education that includes much more than just discussions about the mechanics of sex, but also talks about how to conduct romantic relationships and have good judgment and be empowered. So, just to reiterate, we need to build on existing evidence-based programs about bullying, sex, dating violence, and sexual abuse. We need to join forces with other prevention advocates. We need to rely on core safety skills. In addition, I'll talk about those in a moment. We need to conduct more focus groups to make sure that we've tailored the messages in ways that are acceptable and able to be heard by young people, and we need to evaluate. So here are some of the more general safety skills that I think are included in many education programs and that also should be the core foundation for internet safety education. The ability to de-escalate conflict, so to get out of arguments, harassment, and just de-escalate those situations. Secondly, emotion management, being able to control their own emotions in interactions that are occurring face-to-face and online. Refusal skills, how to resist peer pressure and how to resist requests from other people who they feel perhaps have higher status or more power than they do. Empathy skills, how to be able to understand harms that may be caused to other people or what may be motivating other people. Decision-making skills, how to evaluate the benefits or dangers in any particular situation, and how to seek help from mentors and adults and other friends about situations that may be confusing to them. These are core skills for safety that are not specific to internet technology, but that are often part of other kinds of offline safety programs. So with that, I will stop. I gather that there may be some time for discussion and questions. I hope that you've found this provocative. There is more information about our work in this area from these sources.
Thank you very much for your speech. I'm a big fan of this integrated program. Could you share with us any feedback from young participants, how they find this kind of training programs?
Well, there's so many of these already existing prevention programs. I can't generalize about them, but I can say that as a prevention strategy, school-based education programs are among the most successful technologies, among the most successful prevention programs that prevention experts and social scientists have developed. They are targeting the universal population of people who are still open to changing their attitudes and their behaviors. They're curious about these topics, and they have success sizes or success effects that are larger than those of other kinds of prevention technologies, like, messages on television or on the highway, or even just online programs.
Thank you very much.